says it's live now, but I can't see.
We're for anybody just joining us, we're going to be starting here in a minute. We're trying to get connection with our Facebook. Just joining us, we're going to be starting here in a minute. We're trying to get connection with our technology, how it's so great that we can do this. However, at least I don't have it down pat perfectly, and we will hopefully we'll enjoy this day in this tasting. I'm really looking forward to it.
I think we're all good now, Mark. Oh, shoot, I have to. I'm sorry for all those I didn't let in on time. We're having a little technical difficulties, but I think we're ready to go now.
All right, well, thank you, Suzanne. I welcome everybody. Today is going to be a lot of fun. It's special. I have some special guests here also that's joined us. But real quick, so everybody understands a little bit with the technology, the voice that you just recently heard is my sister Suzanne that handles our marketing, advertising, social media, and different stuff, and behind the scenes, and helps us pull this all together. So also during the presentation, I know there's ways for you to throw out questions and type in questions. So please do that, as Suzanne will help feed some of those questions. So I'm gonna start first by opening a bottle. So everybody, there's two bundles out there. So bundle one, you would have received the Almond Infusion, as well as the Brut Ombré Rosé. And if you had bundle two, well, actually, let me start here. If you had bundle two, you should have Brut Ombré Rosé and the Ensemble. Need to stop. I need to figure out what I'm supposed to be doing on this, so I apologize. All right, here I am. So on bundle two, you would have the Brut Ombré Rosé and the Ensemble. So those are the three that we'll be doing a tasting at the end, but we always like to first start off with a toast. And so I'm choosing a wine, and I have the Ensemble in front of me. So I'm gonna open up the bottle Ensemble, but the one thing because we all like to at least have some wine, because it'll make my presentation even better if you are all able to drink a little wine while I present. But the real issue here, and I always like to go over, is the proper way of opening a sparkling wine bottle. So the first thing is, I mean, this is a live action bottle with pressure in it, which we learned on week one. And always make sure when you open this bottle is that you have your finger over the top the entire time, or put a towel over it, but do not remove your hand from the top. I would not remove the cage, because if you remove the cage right now, you have to take your hand off the cork. Because right now, you take the hand off, there's a chance that this cork could come out, and it's dangerous. People have gotten injured from this. So then you would want to turn the bottle slowly, and whoops, and then you open it. So, all right, so go ahead, get yourself a glass of some bubbles. And today we're going to be talking about bubble nucleation. And let me go into okay, so today we're talking about the bubble. And I already went over this. So we, from the wine standpoint, people, this is the third week for the 2 bundles. So today we're going to be talking about the bubble nucleation. We're going to be talking about the size of the bubble. We're going to talk about the foam and the mousse. Aroma versus bouquet. And then we're going to be going through the tasting notes of the 3 wines. So getting your glass out and looking at the bubbles, everybody should be seeing some bubbles in their glass. And I'm going to pour 2 glasses and see how the 2 glasses are different. All right. Actually, I have a rosé and I have the ombre in that. Well, the whole interesting thing about my 2 glasses is actually most of the bubbles actually start to come from the center area, but my 1 glass actually has an air pocket bubble, so it's not actually producing some bubbles that I'd like it to produce, and I'm going to make a mess on this. But anyway, I'm always fascinated about bubbles, and I can't get this. This is not my plan, so I'm going to go with this glass. Is actually noticing these bubbles and where they're coming from. Is every glass is different, and if you actually had a still wine glass, and I have one poured here with the sparkling wine in it, and there's hardly any bubbles in here. It's a little frosted up, but there's hardly any bubbles. And the whole part of where bubbles have to start from is basically from an imperfection of a glass. And I brought multiple glasses with me. Hold on 1 second. Sorry, I have 20 glasses all over the place. So I have a standard flute here, but I'm kind of taking this still wine that's basically showing no bubbles in it, and I'm pouring it in, and now all of a sudden, whoops, I have to go higher. As you can see, there is actually bubbles there, and it's producing some foam. But on this glass, just to show you, as you can, whoops, I need to raise it, is you can see bubbles that are on the side, but also there's one huge stream that's coming in the center. I don't know if you can notice that. I'm going to try to get it close. But there's a lot of them coming right there from the center. And so bubbles have to start from a point of imperfections. And I'm going to go into my slide now. And so the glass I just showed you, which I have in my hand here, is this same glass. And I took a picture of it earlier today. And this is what, zooming in with a camera, what the bottom of the glass looks like. And so basically, the glass manufacturer put an imperfection in the glass because that's where the bubbles are going to be created from. Is you have carbon dioxide from the fermentation of the wine that's super saturated into the liquid, but it needs points of imperfections in glass, or points of imperfections, really, it doesn't have to be even in glass, that is going to create the CO2 come out of solution. So right here, I'm showing you a little bit picture of a small imperfection. Again, it could be anything from a glass, a strawberry that has imperfections on it, or even lint in a glass is going to create an imperfection. So you have a point of a crack or where a nucleation could start. And right here is what the gas CO2 that actually starts to form. And as more CO2 comes in connection with that bubble, is eventually it's going to become buoyant and comes to the top. So I'm going to re-show that, how it just gets bigger and bigger, and then eventually it's going to become buoyant, come apart, and that's how bubbles form. I mean, it's not, so if there was no imperfection in the glass, is you're not going to see the bubbles. You'll see bubbles come out of solution when you pour it, but you're not going to see it initially. Also, is when you take a sip of it, of the sparkling wine, is you're going to notice a whole bunch of bubbles come out of solution. And go ahead and try that. And your mouth fills up with bubbles. And that's because of all the imperfections on your tongue. And so all that CO2 is coming out of solution. And this is the basic concept of why and how that happens. So the effects of bubble size. So in the traditional method, sparkling wines, and the same method used in the method champenoise, it has the smallest bubbles. And why do they have the smallest bubbles? Is because the tradition of that sparkling wine goes through a long secondary fermentation where it allows that CO2 dissolve into the solution longer. Also, you're fermenting at cooler temperatures, that helps. And also the final pressure of the sparkling wine is higher. So it's also contributing to the ultimate effect of the bubble size. Now in a tank fermentation, which I consider as a little bit medium-sized bubbles, why is because you're going through a much quicker fermentation process, and also the finished pressure of a tank fermentation is lower pressure, which I taught in the 2 weeks ago during the under pressure seminar. And then the carbonation process, which is similar to the almond infusion, is going to be similar to the tank fermentation. It's going to have larger bubbles than the ISC. Why? Because, well, there is no fermentation, but also as we have the lower pressure. So what is the effect on the mousse of the sparkling wine? So if you look at the sparkling wine that's coming on the glass, and I wish I could do a picture of the top, but I'm actually showing the ensemble right now, and you could see around the ring of my glass is what they call the mousse. And how long what affects the mousse? Oops. There we go. All right. The effects of the mousse is the speed that we nucleate. So if we produce a lot of bubbles in a hurry, if we have a glass that produces a lot, we're going to get more mousse. But doesn't mean the mousse is going to stay there a long time. But what part of the mousse is actually how long does it last? And so for the foam or the mousse to be retained is what are the factors that help with our foam is proteins. Proteins is a natural part of grapes. And also beer, and I'm just going to use that as a quick example. Beer has a lot more proteins than wine. So when you pour a beer, why does it have so much foam? Is because it has a lot more proteins in the product than what does wine. But proteins are a huge effect. So within our manufacture, when we're making sparkling wine, it's a critical point in trying to figure out how do we keep the most amount of proteins in the wine to help us with the foam. Acidity is an asset to it, and as well as yeast. So in our pet nat, which we talked about last week, actually the yeast inside in the wine is going to help us with the foam. But also when we age the wine during the aging process of a traditional method, and it's sitting in the bottle, Sir Lee, is that it's that yeast is integrating more, and some of the parts within that yeast actually is helping us with our foam quality. And then what causes foam reduction? So what reduces it? So the big one thing that actually doesn't help us is the higher alcohol. So sparkling wine is around 12.5% alcohol, and that higher alcohol actually isn't help us, where beer is actually a lower alcohol. The other foam reductions is fat and oil. So just like if you took your finger on some soap suds, typically that will burst the bubbles, and that's because of the oils that are on your skin. But also is when the grapes are growing out in the vineyard, just part of the whole natural life of organisms living out there is they actually collect what is called these fatty acids and different things from the environment, and that's just natural. But part of our process when we do sparkling wine is when we first do our initial pressing for the traditional method is we squeeze it real light, and that very, very first juice is not used in the sparkling wine. And the reason why is because that juice is actually washing the skins and have a high component of these fats and oils that are on the skins, and that actually would be anti-foam quality. So it's a way to help us have better, the mousse better, is be keeping that juice set off to the side. We don't throw the juice out because we can use it in our still wines, which we don't have bubbles in. So it's just different factors that affect our foam and our mousse. So aroma versus bouquet. So now if someone calls something, it says a bouquet or aroma, people, I'm not gonna argue with them. But in wine terms in general, is aroma is actually what is the aromatics that come from within the fruit, and the bouquet is part of the process. So when we talk about aromas, what can affect our aromas? It's going to be the variety of the grape. So when we're trying our demi-sec rosé, you know, it has cherry characteristics, or when we have and that's part of the Frontenac grape. When we talk about our Chardonnay, we see a little bit of an apple and different components like that. That is from the variety. The other thing that can affect us is the terroir. So, you know, the grapes that we grow in our vineyard aren't necessarily going to taste the same as what's grown in Southern Illinois. And it's just like when the grapes that are grown in Champagne don't taste exactly the same as the grapes that are grown in California, just part of the location. The vintage is going to change the flavors, the press fractions. So when I talk about the press fractions on sparkling wine is when we do this light press, is I tell you, we kind of separate the very early stuff, and then we take the next cut of juice, and then we press harder and we separate the juice even later. Well, the interesting thing about the different press fractions is the first cuvee has this lightness, and it is actually less fruitier than the harder pressing. So the harder pressing is actually going to, the aromas are actually going to be different. And then vineyard practices, which also, you know, you could have two different growers that are doing different trellis systems or doing different type of things, and that can play the effect of what the flavors are going to be, and the aromas. I just said flavors, but here I'm talking about aromas, is the effects of the aromas. And then the bouquet. The bouquet is actually part of the fermentation process, is so like things that you could potentially smell in a sparkling wine or a wine that might be a little bit from the fermentation process is sometimes a banana effect that comes with sometimes with fermentation. Butter is called part of a malolactic fermentation, and that's the same the smell profile as butter. And so if you go through a malolactic fermentation with malolactic yeast, that's why you get a butter aromatic, or the bouquet. Here I said aromatics. You get a butter bouquet because of that secondary fermentation. And then the other part of the bouquet would be the aging process. So when we are aging our sparkling wine sur lot, we're aging it on the lees, and so you're going to start to pick up more yeast characteristics in their aromas. And then also if we do oak aging, that's considered a bouquet, and just also the evolution of the wine. That's just as the wine gets older, the aromatics will change, and those aromatics with that bouquet, that would be considered more of a bouquet versus aroma, because it's not actually from the grape. So that was my quick talk on the bubble and the bubble nucleation, all about the bubble. And now we're going to go through a tasting, and we're going to go through the ISC 2013 Ensemble Extra Brut, the ISC Brut Ombré Rosé, and the Almond Infusion. And I'm really excited because we have a group of people from Pops for Champagne in Chicago, and our close friend Freddie Brown also with us, that are very instrumental and are part of the creation of the ensemble. So just going, I'm going to explain a little bit about the history of Ensemble. Is when we first started making sparkling wine, I actually went up to Pops for Champagne, and the buyer at the time, Craig Cooper, welcomed me, and he tried what we were doing with our sparkling wine. And he's always a huge advocate of bubbles around the world. And he tried them, and he was impressed with what we were doing. And so that just kind of started. That was back in 2008. Well, in 2010, as we were doing more and more sparkling wine, I approached them and said, would you guys like to do just where we just took the still wine of the sparkling wine, and we put together a blend, and then we'll go back and we'll just make a couple bottles, and then over the years we'll look at it, and then we'll just have fun with the staff, and it's just more of an education process for us as well as Pops for Champagne. Well, lo and behold, is the very first blend, which was back in 2009. I thought it was so good that not just making 12 bottles or whatever, I decided to do 500 bottles, and I said, we'll just figure out what to do with the bottles later. Well, after a couple of years of aging, we decided to go ahead, hey, let's go ahead and disgorge those 12 bottles. Well, I went to Craig at Pops, and he's like, and I told him, I was like, well, we actually have 500 bottles. So if you want, we can actually do a collaboration with this. And that was the beginning. So, and that was 2 years after our first vintage. So the vintages of Pops that we've created an assemblage of is 2009. And then we missed the year because they didn't know that I had so much. And then we picked it up in 2011, 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. And we actually just worked on the 2019 assemblage and started aging it. Well, anyway, and lo and behold, is we're now on, I think, the 6th or 7th release, but I'll let them chime in. I'm talking too much. And I'm gonna, Suzanne, can you unmute some of the guys from Pops here so we can talk and share with the Ensemble Extra Brut?
Hi, Mark.
Hello, Freddie.
How you doing?
Good, cheers.
Awesome. Cheers to you, sir.
Yeah. And just to let everybody know is we just did this Skyping a few weeks ago for the 2019.
Right.
All right, I see Michael in here too. So would you guys like to share a little bit about the 2013 vintage and what you did, what you put into it?
The 13 was the one that was held back for several years, right? Others were released ahead of it?
Correct. Yes, it's the longest one. Yeah, so if people can see is the ensemble here is it's 04, 14, 142. So the you can see the vintage is 2013, but the bottle, we actually bottled it in 0414. That's the first 4 numbers of the batch number. So April 2014. And then we disgorged it in November of 2019. So that would put us at over 5 years sitting in the bottle.
Thank you, Nick.
West, I don't remember. Is it 0 or did we do a 1.5 grams or a half?
It was 1.5 grams.
1.5 grams, that's right, yeah.
So when Michael, can you share just a little bit what about the sugar levels and why we landed on 1.5?
Oh, I don't know that my palate's strong enough to say the differentiation between such a small percentage point, but without a doubt, there is a pretty significant difference when you're tasting it in the moment. If I was to blind taste 1.5 versus 2.5 or even 3.5 right now, I think some of them may not be as evident right off the bat, but in the moment when we were tasting them, you really got a difference right out of the gate of 0.5 gram versus another gram. I don't necessarily entirely remember the cepage of the wine. I mean, it was so long ago, but I do remember. I feel like we cracked a couple of bottles over the years and tasted them.
Yes, Freddie, do you want to join in?
I believe it was the Frontenac Gris that saw the oak barrel, and we held it back because the oak didn't really seem to have integrated very quickly. So like each year we would taste and we would decide to hold it back another year. So like the 14 was released, the 15 was released, and also the 16. Is that right, Mark?
No, not the 16.
just the 14 and 15.
Yes.
And then we went back and released the 13. And it was
Right.
really, it wasn't really us making the decision. It's just what the wine told us. You know, it wasn't open. A lot of times we talk about it as just like, it's just too shy. You know, it's not speaking yet. But now, like, my wife, Monica, loves the 13 and she thinks it's the best one that's ever been made. And so it's really exciting to see these things looking back in time. You know, it's like, wow, like this is such a luxury.
Mark, is that what you sent with the tasting, with the new cepage, with the baselines?
Correct.
I had it the other night. It was phenomenal. I'm a little upset I didn't drink it. I didn't save it until now. I'm drinking a little bit of red Rhone, a rare moment when I'm out of champagne. but
yeah,
it was spectacular. I mean, it really, really drank well.
Yeah, well, it is, and and just to share with everybody, when Michael was talking about how, like, in blind you don't necessarily could tell a difference in a little bit of a sugar level. However, I mean, we had these bottles lined up next to each other, so when you could actually try them one versus the other, and that's where he was saying it's incredible on how the differences you see when you have things right next to each other.
Yeah, I mean, you had it pretty dosed up. You had a couple of different versions, right? I can't remember how many you brought out in that cooler, but you had a lot of different dosages put in.
Yeah. So also share a little bit about the aromatics of the Ensemble here with everybody is with this aging also is, I feel like it brings out some of this biscotti notes. That's one, and that's an influence between a little bit of the oak and because of the aging in the barrel. Also having a little bit of that malolactic fermentation, I think it gives a little bit of this whole butter effect. So I feel like you got this little almond, you got this, where I just kind of call it, and a little bit of a baking effect from the aging process. So it's a little bit of I think it kind of has that biscotti aromatics. Yeah, and then it has great acidity. And part of it is I feel like it has some lime, a little bit of lime to it. And that lime is going to be coming from that Frontenac grape, a characteristics of the grape itself. So anyway, that is there any other notes that you guys would like to share on the Ensemble?
No, that's pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, well, and the one thing, if no one has ever had a chance to go visit Popster Champagne, it's incredible. You can see Michael there. He's pretty much always behind the bar, except obviously not during these times right now. But their knowledge and their help when you walk in, and it's not like you need to go figure out what wine you want to be drinking. Which you can actually choose whatever you want off the menu, but they're extremely knowledgeable, and it's been so fun to work with them because of their knowledge, and they're that with everybody. It's awesome, and also I had suggested food pairings for everybody tonight, or do carryouts, and tonight I was doing the grill out, and I was talking about the burgers and brats, but the other thing is with those is you got to have the fries. And so you have to have fries, and I just want to let you know is the best fries that I have or ever have is at Pops for Champagne. And so even though they go great with sparkling wine, they make awesome frites and it's to die for. But I definitely, if you get a chance. And the Ensemble is only sold through our tasting room and at Popster Champagne. It's just that's the only places you can get it.
Just to touch on the pairing note as well, the potato chips from Mark's local grocery store pair very well with the Ensemble.
I'll say.
The kettle cooked.
The kettle cooked.
Well, thank you guys. All right, so we're gonna go on to the Brut Ombré Rosé next, which everybody's gotten the Brut Ombré Rosé.
Mark, I'm
And
gonna jump in just 1 second. We did have
Oh.
one question on the ensemble.
Yes, I forgot to take questions.
Asking if they can still purchase this, which I think you just answered that. They can get it at our tasting room, or when Pops opens up again, they can get it there. But they wanted you to discuss the sweetness of the ensemble because they got the other bundle.
Oh, yeah, so so it's definitely, the ensemble is drier. It's a brut. But the actual sugar, and when we were talking about the little bit of sugar, it's more of to help balance the wine. Yeah, so it's not sweet by any means on it, but it's very well balanced. The oak and that, it's not like I think it finishes very smooth, but it is dry. Does that help explain it, Suzanne?
Yep, I think that's a good answer.
Were there any questions on my presentation? I kind of forgot to ask.
Mark, I have a quick question if I can.
Yeah.
Have we, historically with the ensemble, we've always dosaged it below like 3 grams, right? Have we ever gone above 3 grams? It's always been I mean, it's always lived harmoniously as far as the balance of the wine altogether. But I mean, overall, we've kept the dosage pretty low, right?
I'm almost definite that the answer is yes on that. The one that when we did the magnums, what I think might have been the highest sweetness level, and I don't know, and it might have even been the rosé magnum that we made, might have been the higher, but it was always brut, and I think it was probably less than 5, and it might have been closer to 3, but that one could have creeped up to 8 or something.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I'll check that out and get back to you on that. All right, Suzanne, you said no more questions right now? All right, so I'm gonna now go to the Brut Ombré Rosé. 2 weeks ago, we had our Brut, and that's our workhorse, the one we definitely sell the most of. The Brut Ombré Rosé is actually is right there with our Brut. We sell a ton of it, a lot of it. It's kind of like the brighter of our Brut as far as our two most popular and biggest selling wines. The Brut Ombré Rosé right now is sitting with about 10 grams per liter of sugar. And where that sugar comes into an effect on the Brut Ombré Rosé is it actually brings a little bit of a creaminess effect. So with the trying to somewhat keep consistency from year to year, and that's where we can play with our dosage, is that sugar level actually gives us a little bit of an effect of a creaminess. So this is definitely going to be, it's drier than the Almond Infusion for the people that have the bundle 1, but it is going to taste a little bit sweeter than the ensemble. You definitely still get some of the yeast bouquet from it. I'm going to pour a little bit more in here. And as we're talking about bubble nucleation, is I have that, and actually I brought some raspberries, and so woo. So did you guys see that? Oh, did I? Well, I'll throw another raspberry. I might not have my glass high enough, but so all of a sudden I throw in a raspberry, and you see the big poof of bubbles. So all those bubbles found new locations of where the CO2 can come out of solution. So you want to get so the bad thing about lots of bubble nucleation is that it's going to take the bubbles out of your wine quicker. So so you know, if you're just being slow and steady at going through your glass of wine, is when you start throwing fruit into it, is potentially you're not going to have many bubbles left towards the end of that glass. So that's a bit about the Ombre Rosé. And then the last one I have is the Almond Infusion. And I actually do not have that one open yet. And so the Almond Infusion was was a wine that we started after, again, making sure you keep your hand always over the cork when opening. Also, why I'm showing the bottle here, remember everybody is, people who got the bundles, you got the sparkling wine stoppers, I know I've gone through it, but these are a great way to be able to save your wine. So don't forget about the stoppers. So the Almond Infusion, we came out with it, it's just, and it's just been popular. And the one, so this is the base wine of the Almond Infusion, is we use a lot of when we talk about the sparkling wine and we take the premier cuvee for ISC, is we'll actually take the Thai cut, which is still very good wine, and we'll use it as part of the infusion, like Almond Infusion, and then we'll also then sweeten it, and in this case is we'll add almond, natural almond flavoring to it to get the almond flavor. So I always describe this as more of like an amaretto. You know, I think for people that are just getting into bubbles and like sweetness, is we see that, you know, a lot of times for the sweet wine drinker is this has been popular in weddings, or like, you know, where they'll use it as a wedding cake. So when we actually bottle the Almond Infusion, I'll get some of these powdered donuts, and it's kind of like a small wedding cake flavor, and you can actually taste it with the powdered donuts. And I think the pairing with the powdered donuts goes very well together. The other thing is now, if you like amaretto and you like amaretto sours, this does make a great mimosa. So you could also put orange juice in it. But I also got some sweet and sour mix, and actually, if you take some of that with some sweet and sour and add it, and you can even put ice on it. Now, granted, you're going to start to lose some of your bubbles, but actually you can pretty much have an almond infusion or almond amaretto sour with using our Almond Infusion. So anyway, just different ways and be able to do things with bubbles. I really have enjoyed these 3 weeks, and I hope everybody was able to learn stuff. I hope everybody definitely enjoyed the wine. Don't ever hesitate to shoot out questions to us. And also, we're looking at trying to do maybe some more interaction stuff on some more wines. I know we have a number of things that are going on the next couple of weeks, so check us out. And Suzanne, are there any other questions? I'll see if there's any other questions out there before I leave.
I'm not seeing any questions if anyone wants to chime in.
Well, you know what? I forgot to toast everybody at the beginning. I apologize. And I've already taken all my glasses and that, but we'll do a last hurrah toast to everybody. You know, cheers, and we'll all get through this together to health, happiness, good times, and wish everybody the best. And thank you all. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.